watching last week, you'll notice that there was a disruption in the video. That disruption was because of a power outage that we had in our area, and so the video, there's several minutes missing in the video at the beginning, and then you joined us again as soon as the power came back on. So if you're wondering what happened, that's what happened. So you missed a portion of the reading of chapter 4. So if you're joining us now, we are in chapter 4, beginning in verse 19. Nebuchadnezzar has told his wise men his dream. They have not been able to be helpful to him. And Daniel comes in later. Who knows why he comes in later? Perhaps he has been busy doing duties throughout the kingdom or throughout the city someplace else. We could speculate about a lot of different things, but the fact of the matter is he comes in last. And Nebuchadnezzar tells him his dream, and as we begin in verse 19, then Daniel is astonished for 1 hour. Now, the term 1 hour simply means that he is taken back for a moment. It doesn't mean a literal hour. It simply means he is quiet for a minute. He is gathering his thoughts. He is troubled for a minute. He is bothered by what he hears, and so he is taken aback, we might say. Okay? And it says his thoughts troubled him. Now we see the relationship between the two. This is not the same king that we saw in chapter 2 or chapter 3, who he tries to comfort. Maybe it's not the right word, but he lets Daniel know that it's all right. Don't let whatever the dream means bother you. He wants to know the truth, whatever it was. But see, this is the same man in chapter 2. In chapter 2, he wanted to know the truth as well, but he was more brash and hateful about the way he came about it. But now he is more comforting. He's more relaxed about telling this individual, and you kind of see a relationship between the two, and we kind of talked about why that might have been between these two individuals last week. But anyway, Nebuchadnezzar tells him, says, don't let what the dream means or what the dream is trouble you. Just tell me the answer, and let me know what it means. And so in the latter part of 19, Daniel tells him something which I find interesting. It shows that Daniel also has, shall we say, an affection, a relationship with Nebuchadnezzar as well. And we can contrast that to what we will see in the next chapter, because in the next chapter he doesn't speak so kindly to that king, does he? He doesn't seem to have those reservations of telling that king what the thing means, that the writing on the wall means. He just comes right out and tells him. But either way, Daniel is forthcoming in what he has to say. He tells him straight forth what the meaning of the dream is. But he tells him, says, my Lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation of it to thine enemies. Meaning, I wish it wasn't to you. I wish it was about your enemies. But the meaning of that obviously is, it is about you. It isn't about your enemies, and there is a foreboding about the meaning. So as he starts to tell Nebuchadnezzar about his dream, you already know the end is not good. Nebuchadnezzar has to be sitting heavy in his seat already. He knows it is not a good thing that he's about to hear. Okay? So he tells him this tree that he sees, and remember, he goes over the same thing, how tall the tree is and how much fruit is on the trees and how far it can be seen and all this type of stuff. Who is envisioning this? Is this how God sees Nebuchadnezzar, or is this how Nebuchadnezzar sees himself? I suggest to you the verbiage that is being used is maybe this is how Nebuchadnezzar sees himself, how important Nebuchadnezzar finds himself. In verse 22, Daniel tells him, "It is thou, O king." This is you. The tree is you. You are that tree. This dream is about you. And thou have grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reached unto heaven. Has it literally reached into heaven? Nebuchadnezzar thought so, didn't he? Well, here it was. God had spoken to him. God had given him dreams. The gods had paid attention to him. So he was important to the gods. Nebuchadnezzar was an important man in all the earth. See how he sees himself? Can you see how chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 1 and how God had, the God of heaven, had allowed him to conquer all these kingdoms, but he did it in the name of who? His God. Now he acknowledges in chapter 2 and chapter 3 that the God of Daniel and the God of Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael is important, but he still does it in the name of his own gods. He's still a polytheist. So he just puts the God of heaven in his pantheon of gods. He's just another one of them. But he's about to learn a lesson. So, thy greatness has grown and reached into heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. And this term, to the end of the earth, is a term that is used not only by the Chaldean kings, but was also used by the Persian kings. To the end of the earth. They controlled the end of the earth. They thought they were very important. They did control a vast amount of land, particularly in that period of time. But they were really expressing, a great deal of self-importance. Okay? All right, now, as he goes on, Daniel is still using the terminology that Nebuchadnezzar knew. He's still using polytheistic terminology. So he's using terminology that Nebuchadnezzar understands. Right? Whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one. This is not Jewish terminology. This is terminology of Nebuchadnezzar. A watcher and a holy one come down from heaven saying, do what? Cut the tree down. All of a sudden, all these things that was important to Nebuchadnezzar is gone. All of his glory, all of this stuff that Nebuchadnezzar found so important, now was taken away in a heartbeat. Just like cutting down a tree, it's gone. But that ray of hope, again, the word "but" is so important, isn't it? In this verse, in verse 23, it's actually yet. It's the same thought. Yet leave the stump and the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass. Okay. So, 7 times will pass over him. Oh, people go nuts over this 7 times. They want to try to make that into a literal amount of time. Okay. 7 times are going to pass over him. All right, now in verse 24, Daniel starts to interpret it. Now notice, this is an interesting way the dialogue goes. First, Nebuchadnezzar is speaking, and then Daniel starts to speak. And then when Daniel starts to speak, he speaks of Nebuchadnezzar in the third person. So if you read the way the dialogue goes, it's an interesting dialogue. I suggest to you what has happened is Nebuchadnezzar uses Daniel as his scribe to write these things down. That would make sense, does it not? Because he wants to honor the God of heaven. That's the way we started, right? That's what we started in verse 1 and 2. He wants to honor the God of heaven because he's learned something. Okay, verse 24. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of, notice now, Daniel uses the right Jewish terminology. The Most High, the one God. Okay, we won't see that terminology used again until we get to almost to the last again. Which has come upon my Lord the King. Okay, the Most High is going to do something to you. There is one God, is what he's saying. The Most High, the one God, not the multiplicity of gods. There is one God, and he's going to do something to you. He's made this decree, and you're not going to be able to get away from it. He says in verse 25, they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling will be with the beasts of the field, and thou shalt make thee eat grass as oxen, and thou shalt wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee. What does the 7 times mean? Till thou know the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomsoever he will. So there's a purpose. God has a purpose here. What's God's purpose? Nebuchadnezzar's going to learn something. And in Nebuchadnezzar learning something, we all should learn something. And what is that? Yeah, God is in control. That's the point. It's no bigger or smaller than that. God is in control. Okay? And we need to remember that. Okay? And then he goes on. Whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure to thee. Now this is an interesting statement. Here, the king is told he's going to go mow grass like an ox, but his kingdom is going to be sure to him. Now this shows the powerful nature of God. He's telling him that you're going to lose your mind for a period of time until you realize that I am in control and I give the kingdoms to whoever. You did all of this stuff that you were just bragging about because I gave it to you. But I'm going to keep your kingdom to you. It's going to be sure to you. Nobody's going to take it away from you during this period of time. Now, isn't that interesting? Who would even think that would be possible? All things are possible with God. But you wouldn't, in this day and time, if everybody knows that a world leader has lost his mind, he has lost his power, hasn't he? In this case, the most powerful men in the world at that time, and Nebuchadnezzar was at that time, what's the saying, is goofy as a rat? I mean, there's a lots of terms that we can, he has no marbles in there, okay? I mean, they're gone. Okay. Thy kingdom shall be sure to thee after thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Okay. Somebody up above there, it rules over things. It's not you. You need to learn to be thankful. Like all of us need to be thankful. Thankful for the food that we have, our health, for the jobs that we have. Who allows that to be possible? Everything that we have, the shoes on our feet, the clothes on our back, the cars that we drive, the country in which we live, everything that we have is due to who? How many people today know that? And he doesn't have to work miraculously in order for us to be provided those things. It's as important for us to say thank you for the food that we eat today, even though he didn't provide it miraculously, because he still provided those things, didn't he? And we need to be thankful for those above us who have rule over us, who allow us to be able to have those things. That's why it's important for us to thank those who go to war for us, our military, our police, our EMTs, our firefighters, all individuals that put their lives at risk that we might have the things that we have. Every individual. And there's so many people behind the scenes, we don't even know who some of them are. Husbands should be thankful for their wives. Wives should be thankful for their husbands. We all have a part to play. And if we don't realize that there is an order that God has set, the home, the church, the community, then we have missed the boat. And that's one of the things that's wrong with our country today, that there are so many that don't realize that they are part of a community and they have a part to play. Things don't come for free. They're not thankful. Yeah, kids get spanked, don't they? Okay. Verse 27, we see Daniel's compassion again. He said, "Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to him." Notice there's not a break in the things that he says. And he's not afraid to tell the king. Give the king counsel. The king didn't ask for counsel. He just gives the king counsel. So again, this shows there's a relationship between the two of them. Okay? "Let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening to thy tranquility." What's Daniel saying?
The sooner you get it, the sooner you understand, the sooner you're going to be back in where you want to be.
No.
Hurry up and repent.
Yeah.
Get it.
Yeah. He needs to repent, but I think he's telling him the end part of this is absolutely inevitable, but you might be able to stave off some of it if you repent now and do good. And maybe some of those things won't come on you quite so quickly. It's kind of like Hezekiah's, being told that he's going to die, and he prays, and his life is lengthened. I mean, the inevitable is going to happen. However, he was, he had years added to his life. And it's kind of like the saying. It says, if it might be. He's not certain that God will be merciful to him and give him a little more time. However, he's suggesting that it might be possible.
Seems like with what was getting ready to happen, he would just want to go ahead and get it over with. So rather than waiting, the punishment, to shorten the amount of punishment, it seems.
And to your point too, if you get the point, if you begin to learn the point, and if you learn to repent, then when it does come on you, perhaps it'll be easier to learn the lesson that you're supposed to learn. Excuse me.
I mean, it wasn't guaranteed that he was going to learn the lesson. I mean, God foresaw that he would, but he had to choose. And of course, if you have feathers and go out and eat grass like an oxen, I think I learned that pretty quick. That, hey, this ain't right. And I've been made to bow down. If you're on all fours eating like an oxen, you're bowing down. And I was once the high tree, and now I'm on my knees. And so I think I'd be praying a lot like Daniel, or like Jonah was praying in the belly of the whale. But I'm ready to get this over with.
Yeah, I've never had anything that I wanted. I've never been rich by this world standards. I am rich when I go to a third world country. They consider me rich. And trust me, when I see some people in the state that they are, I do consider myself rich. Trust me. But, I can't go out and buy anything I want to. I don't get anything I want to. Nobody's at my beck and call. And Chayla makes that very clear to me on a regular basis. But, here's a man that did. He had people at his beck and call. He could get anything he wanted, anything he knew of in that world's time. He had it at his beck and call. And so he was, by that world standard, by that period of time standard, he was beyond rich. He was beyond a billionaire. He had everything. And to fall from that position to literally having nothing, eating grass, that has to hurt. I mean, I've had days, back when I was in construction, I've had days where I've slept in my car, going from job to job, and everything I owned was in my vehicle. But it didn't really bother me much. I mean, that's just the way things were at that time. I was happy. Because I've never missed a meal. I was never starving. I was never at a position where, I was going to be hurt or was in fear of my life, or, I've been in parts of cities that I thought were dangerous and I didn't really want to stay there, but I had the ability to get out, So I don't ever consider myself at the point of what some of this world's poor are, that don't know where the next meal is coming, don't have a job, that feel desperate. I don't know what it would be like to go from that position of Nebuchadnezzar all the way down to being in the field. I don't know what that would be like. I have no idea.
It makes me think of in Matthew chapter 3, where Jesus or God tells the Jews, you think you're special and they were high and mighty like the big tree because you're God's chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I could raise up these stones as Abraham's seed. Don't think you're any higher than the stones. And he's telling Nebuchadnezzar, I could take an ox and make him king. So don't think that you're any better than anybody else. I can take a beast of the field and make him king. And so, I think they're very similar parallels, that.
Yeah.
And it was about the same thing, arrogance, lifting oneself
Sure.
up.
Thinking of oneself more highly than they ought to think.
I think when you read in verse 36, not only did he lose all of his physical things, he lost his mind.
Mm-hmm.
When he said his reason returned to him, he was insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of all the things I've lost, I missed my mind the most, yeah. Okay. So in verse 29 it says, at the end of 12 months he was walking in the palace in Babylon, and the king spake and said, is this not great Babylon, which I have built in the house of the kingdom by the power of my might and for the honor of my majesty? Aren't I great? Well, if he ever did, he forgot it, didn't he? But remember, if you look, remember how beautiful Babylon was, and if you can see it in your mind's eye, if you can really kind of visualize how beautiful Babylon was at that time, this is not this is not an empty statement. He had built a gorgeous, a beautiful city. He really had. The problem was what? Well, he gave himself all the glory. It was all about me.
And he didn't accept Daniel's counsel.
Yeah.
Daniel said, let this be acceptable. In other words, accept it
Mm-hmm.
and repent. And obviously didn't. And God gave him time. At the end of 12 months. Gave him 12 months.
Notice in verse 31, while the word was still in the king's mouth. Ooh.
He had heard enough.
Yeah. While it was still in his mouth. Boy, I've got a overdeveloped sense of vengeance sometimes, and it's not good for me. There are a lot of times I'd like to see that happen, with certain individuals, particularly in our political realm right now. But that's not God's plan right now. However, it would be interesting to have seen that. While it was still in his mouth. Think what it would be like on that last great day when the trumpet sounds. Don't you know some people are going to be saying and doing certain things, and that trumpet's going to blow, and they're going to know in their heart that instant, that same instant. But it's too late. The horn is blown. The last moment has happened. There is no more. Time is no more. It has come to an end. And all there will be left for some individuals is fear. There fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, unto thee is it spoken, thy kingdom is departed from thee. I'm taking it away. Okay? And again, he is told he shall be driven from men, and he will eat grass like oxen until 7 times pass over thee, until thou know. Again, here's what the purpose of this is. Until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomsoever he will. The same hour, the thing was fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. Again, Nebuchadnezzar is still being spoken of in the third person. And he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. This didn't happen right away. It took a little time. For your hair to grow that long and for your nails to grow that long, it didn't happen immediately. This wasn't just 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know how long it was, but I know it wasn't just a short period of time. It took a little time. Obviously, several years passed where he didn't have his mind. It was taken from him. People today who think too much of themselves have lost their mind. You can take that any way you want to. When sin enters our mind, when sin controls our life, when we allow sin to start controlling us, what happens to us? We do not think correctly. It's very difficult for you to start discussing things with those people and for them to even accept anything spiritual, right? They can't. They can't see it. Why is that? Because sin rules in their mortal body. They have to put to death those things to start looking at things correctly. Now, I am not making fun of individuals who have a mental illness, true mental illness. That's not what I'm talking about. There's chemical imbalances in people's minds that they cannot help. That is not what I am talking about. Those individuals need medical doctors, and they need medical help. Those individuals can't help it. I am talking about individuals who accept sin, who choose to think wrongly, and after a while they get so messed up in their thinking they cannot reason correctly. When you accept falsehood, it begins to warp the way you look at life. When you accept sin, it begins to warp you, and you cannot look at things correctly. The scriptures teach that, and we need to understand that. And so if we are surprised when the world around us is so warped in the way that they are acting, well, duh. They've accepted so much sin and so much immorality, what else could they do? They can't accept those things which are spiritual. They are not spiritual. They don't think spiritual. And that's why it's always so important for us to imbibe God's Word. Okay. Quickly. At the end of days. How long was it? I don't know. Was it 7 years, as some had suggested? It may have been. As I've already told you, for a person's fingernails to grow that long, for their hair to grow that long, it takes some time. It may have been 7 years. I do not know. But I know the idea of 7 times means that God fulfilled what he had intended to fulfill. And I know that because When he comes to his reason, what does he do? He acknowledges that God's way is correct. He acknowledges that God is in control. And he praises the God of heaven. So God accomplished what he intended to accomplish in Nebuchadnezzar. And that's what 7 times, the idea of 7, means. That God is going to accomplish what he intended to accomplish. Okay? Verse 36, at that same time my reason returned unto me, and for my glory and my kingdom, mine honor and brightness returned unto me, and my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Okay, his kingdom was kept sure to him. Remember, the stump was kept in iron and brass, so the kingdom was kept to him, and it was able to grow again. The tree was able to grow again. So Nebuchadnezzar was able to sprout. The roots were kept secure. And so in the dream, in the thought of the dream, in that analogy, if you were, is that the correct thing? Is analogy or is it allegory? Okay. In that analogy, it is able to sprout and start growing again, and so the king was able to maintain his kingdom, or take over his kingdom once again. So he was reestablished in his kingdom. Now verse 37, the important part. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar again begins to speak. I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment or justice, and those who walk in pride, what? He is able to abase. God is able. Keep that in your mind. God is able. Thank you very much for your kind attention.